So this is done with the help of transaction code CFC1. So when you are doing this user parameter transaction specification, okay, so in this you actually make certain entries for the different parameter. Okay. Sorry. Not this. Sorry. So okay. So the next setup was that you need to define a number range which was CFC8. Okay. So this is the standard number where you can actually define the number range for the parallels. Okay. And then there is another transaction where you can actually specify. So you don't have to do anything there. So the transaction is CFC3. So there you need to actually define the filter and the selector block size. So you don't need to do anything here. You just need to check what are whether the different entries are correct or not. So for example, for different stocks and sources. So this is the standard entry you generally get it. But this is part of the initial landscape maintenance. Okay. So what you need to see here, mainly you need to see the shipping point if the entry is here. So it's T underscore SHP. SHP stands for shipping point. Okay. So that means the entries are here. Sales order entries are here. Vendor entry is here and shipping point entry is here. So you just need to specify this. So this is a block size recommendation which SAP always updates it in standard. Okay. So basically this will determine the number of data objects that will be transferred to TM in case there is an RFC from the initial data transfer. Okay. And it is always recommended not to change any filter and block size which is specified by SAP here. Okay. So this is the next one where you maintain view for the filter size. The next is the change transferred for master data. So that means there is another transaction which is CFC9. So here what you do, so this is important because all the master data changes. Suppose you are changing any material master, customer master, vendor master, shipping points, all are configured as a periodic transfer to TM. So any change which is done, you basically needs to indicate this, that all the changes will only be transferred. In that case, if you schedule it as a batch job, all the changes will be transferred as a batch job from the ECC to TM. Okay. So for that, you need to maintain this master data change transfer value to F2. 2 means immediately the changes should be transferred. Or if you want to make it as a batch job, then you have to change it to 1. Okay. Similarly for customer also, for vendor also. Okay. Then before you actually do this, so this is my targets changes for SIF. The next is we need to activate the change pointer. So in order to activate the change pointer, the transaction code is BD61. So this configuration is actually a prerequisite for transferring any master data change with the change pointer. So that is what we call as an activate change pointer. And that is done through BD61. And then you can also activate the change pointer per message type. That is also a possibility. Okay. So the next part is you need to activate the online transfer using business transaction meeting. So that means there is a transaction code BF11. And here what you have to do, here basically there are two applications, ND dash APO and NDI. So this BTE means business transaction event. So this BTE will be used to activate the online transfer for both the transaction data changes and the master data changes. Okay. So for that, this ND underscore APO is actually the new dimension plugin APO, and NDI is the new dimension integration APO application. And these both needs to be activated here. So in standard, again, you will get this. You don't have to do anything. Okay. The next transaction code, what we have is SMQR. So this is, as I told you, the transfer of data between source to destination is done through queues. So when your particular, the APO system or your TM system will send the planning result to your ECC system, the queues will be generated in the ECC system in the inbound. So in that case, it is very important that the inbound queues that are to be processed must be registered in the scheduler. So this is an activity which your basis guy should do. And here you actually need to maintain the queue input scheduler where the type, the mode, the runtime, attempts, all this information needs to be specified. So this is called as a queue in scheduler. Okay. So in that case, you need to mark this here. And the transaction code is SMQ1. Okay. Similarly, we need a queue out scheduler. So queue out scheduler means so here it is SMQS. So queue out scheduler means the outbound queues will be processed by the scheduler. So that is what is called as a queue out. So there will be inbound scheduler as well as outbound scheduler. Okay. So here the target system to where the RFCs will be sent are registered here. So this is all the transactions or setup we need to do in your ECC system. Any question? Clear to everyone?
So just one question, Vinod. I mean, all these settings are basically responsibility of SAP basis team members, right?
Not everything. You have to coordinate with basis and check all these are there. Okay, because I agree most of them are basis, but this is part of the system preparation activity where both functional and basis has to work with each other.
Okay.
Okay. So similarly, there are certain transactions which you also need to run in TM system. Again, these are something which also relates to some basis activities, but these are part of the system preparation activity. And this comes into the picture only when you are basically mainly setting up the master data analysis. So if I go into the TM system, so in the TM system, again, the first transaction is that you need to define the logical system. Okay. So again, the logical system definition, you see now I'm in PD client. Okay. And here also you need to define the logical system for both ECC as well as TM. Okay. So it's PD client 300. Okay. and also the ID client 800 is there. Okay. And the second is again, just as we have assigned the logical system to the client, the same thing we need to also do for TM system also, where we need to assign the logical system to the client and the transaction code is SCC4. Okay. So here again, the second step is assign logical system to client. The third step is we need to set up RFC destination. So this is the same. Okay. The RFC destination is again SM59. So basically you need to go to SM59 and basically check whether the ECC connection is there or not. Okay. So for my ECC, it's okay. So this is my ID client 800. So once this is there, the next setup is more or less it's the same that, okay, we need to maintain the business system group. If you remember, I have already shown you the maintenance of the business system group. So that is again, if you don't remember, you can also go directly into the transaction code SAP APO/C1. Remember the business system group which you created? So the main objective of business system group is to determine the assignment to the respective ECC system that are to be connected, right? So in case your TM system is connected with multiple ECC system where they use the same number range of material, plant, vendor, customer, then we need to define multiple BSG group. But in case you are using to one ECC system, one BSG group to one RFC setup is sufficient. Okay. So this next is the maintenance of BSG system. Next is assign the logical system to the business system group. That is the next. So again, I had already shown you this, but just to recollect. So instead of C1, just change this to C2. Okay. So here you need to enable, that every ERP system, which is my ID8 system, must be assigned to a BSC. Okay. So if you see this ID8 is assigned to a BSC. Okay. And there is another transaction where you need to assign some user parameter. So this user parameter is instead of C2, it should be C4. And here you can specify basically the logging process as well as the debugging process. Okay. So this is the user parameter which will set or control how data records should be logged in case an application log is happening or required to be maintained for a specific user. Okay. So yeah, you can use this functionality to debug in case any queues get created for that user. So in case you want to use it for all the users, rather than using a single user, you can also use the star mark. Star mark means it will be applicable for all. Okay. And last part is,
What is the T code for this one, Vinod?
sorry?
What is the transaction code for this one? User parameter?
Yeah, the transaction code is C4. It just change with C4.
C4. Okay.
Okay. The next part is you need to maintain the queue in scheduler. So then maintain queue in scheduler. So while you are maintaining a queue in scheduler, okay, so that means when the ECC will be sending the master and the transaction data to the ECC system, okay, so it will generate the queues in the inbound of the APO system. APO system is my TM system. So these inbound queues needs to be processed by the TM system. So for that, the registration needs to happen also in the queue in scheduler. So the transaction code for queue in scheduler is SMQR. So in the SMQR, you need to specify for which, based on which queue name it is done. So generally we use the queue name CF. So if you see, there has to be something called CUF, CF, or let me see, CSC. So this is the standard queues which gets processed with this nomenclature. Okay. And finally, you need to also, or the basis team should also need to specify the queue out scheduler. So queue out scheduler transaction code is SMQS. So these are queue out means these are the outbound queues which needs to be processed by the scheduler, and the scheduler will be configured using SMQS by the basis team. So the transaction code here is SMQS. Okay. Now, once you have done this, there are 2 or 3 other transactions which you need to not maintain. It will always be there. Okay. There is a transaction. Instead of C1, you will just type CP1. / SAP APO / C1. Does not exist. Okay. Maybe they have removed this. Okay. Okay. Maybe you can neglect that. Okay. This is what the different transactions and setup is required. And once it is done, you just need to create the integration model, and then you need to activate the model. And that's how the entire process flow of your transfer of master data happens between ECC to TM. Any question from anyone? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So why I'm showing you this, because even though it is a basis activity, but at least you should be, in case some master data transfer shipping does not work, so you can have the chance to, check whether all this information is there or not. Okay. So yeah. So the next transaction, what we will be seeing is the master data. What we'll be seeing is the transportation zone. Okay. So what is the significance of transportation zone? I tell you. So if you see here, we have defined the location, and now we'll define transportation zone. The transportation zone means what? Suppose if you are moving, if you consider this scenario, if we're moving from Cologne to Chicago via these 2 ports, right? So this Bremen port is in Germany and this Newark port is in US. And both these ports, or rather both these locations, which is at the European location and here, which is at the US location, basically they are into 2 different zones. Why two different zones? Because one is in the Europe zone, another in the US zone. What is the benefit of that? The benefit is sometimes the carrier will try to send you or basically do the charge calculation based on regions or zones rather than sending you location. So if you are grouping the multiple locations into one zone, so there are three ways by which the grouping can be done. So I can group based on location ID, I can group based on your region, and I can group based on postal code. Because if you remember when I showed you that, the location master data, I have shown you that in the address master, in the address data of the location master, you can maintain country, you can maintain region, you can maintain city, as well as you can maintain your postal code. So that's how the grouping can be done. And also, if you are doing the grouping, the major advantage is that using the grouping process, you can actually reduce the maintenance of master data. So with more transportation zone, if you're creating a transport zone and if you're putting all the locations into one zone, you don't need to maintain all the locations for that zone individually when you are doing any type of planning and all. Just maintain the zone, system will automatically consider the grouping of locations into it. Okay. So in order to create the zone, basically what you have to do, you go into this BD transaction or rather BD client, which is your TM client. And here, if you click on this master data, if you expand this transportation network, if you expand this transportation zone, and here you can define the transportation zone. So when you are defining any transportation zone, system will first of all ask you what is the name of the zone. So I tell that the name of the zone is transportation zone underscore Europe. Okay. And it is maybe created today. Okay. And you give a description. The transportation zone includes block plus port of loading. Okay. Just some simple example of description. And once you've done this, then if you see below, there are three ways by which the zones can be grouped. The important part here is that in case of transportation zone, there is no configuration required. Nothing needs to be configured because you already have locations and you just need to maintain the locations here. So in case you don't want to maintain location within a zone, you can also group the locations based on postal code. So if you go here, system will ask you what is the postal code and what is the country. Accordingly, all the locations where the postal code will match will automatically be put under these locations, under this zone. Similarly, if you are doing it based on region, system will ask you what is the country and what is the region. So all the locations whose country and region will match will already be considered under this transportation zone. So what I will do based on location, and you should not use any three. You should at least use one of the parameters. So I'll do it based on location. So first location, I suppose I'm using this shipping point, SPWM01, for example. Okay. Okay. The second location, what I'm using is my port of loading, right? So if I want to use my port of loading, I forgot the port there. So my location type was port. And here I can say my port of bringing, right? So my port of bringing. And in case you feel that certain locations needs to be seen already, in case the same location is being used in some other transportation zone, you'll get a warning message. And in case you want to remove some of the location from the zone, you can click on this exclude button. And once you click on this exclude button, you can just click on the save. Okay. Any question? Clear to everyone? transportation zone. Yes. T-zone underscore EU underscore something. Please let me know if you're not able to understand me, okay? If you're keeping quiet, that means I assume you are understanding, okay? So similarly, if I want to create another transportation zone, because I have a two transportation zone, one for my Europe, another for my US, right? So in that case, what I will do, I will create another transportation zone. And here I need to basically maintain this value here. Okay, so this is my zone. So I will use my US zone. So the date is 12.08. And here I'll give a description. Transportation zone will include location and port of discharge. Okay, and here I'll use the two location. So my first location is my port of destination. And the second one is my customer location. Okay. So with this, your transportation zone comes to end. Any question?
No, then.
Okay. So once we have defined a transportation zone and this one, so there is another transaction where you can actually, if I go to the location, I can assign a transshipment point. So what do you mean by transshipment point? So if you remember yesterday I told you transshipment point is that point where the goods are loading and unloading happens, right? So that means if I go into this, so these are my two transshipment points because this is the place where goods are unloaded and reloaded and also the mode of transport changes. So that's why it is called as a transshipment point. Okay. So for any transshipment points, we need to basically assign those transshipment points. And then accordingly, we can basically set it up. Okay. So how to assign the transshipment point? So in order to have the transshipment points created, so what we have to do, basically you can assign the transshipment points here. So for example, if I go into this zone, so my first zone was, so this is my US Europe zone, and this is my US zone. So this is my zone here. And here I can maintain my transportation zone here. And my location was port of loading, right? So in case you want to assign the port of loading also as a transshipment point for this zone, then I need to just select this port of loading and I need to assign here the transshipment point. That's it. And then I just need to click on create update assignments. Okay. And if you go back, you can also go into the table contents. And here you can see the assignment, which are the locations or which are the transshipment locations. The port of Bremen has been assigned to the Europe zone. Okay.
So what is the difference like between the location and the transshipment location? Like they're using the same name here.
No, we are not using the same name here. Basically, here you are just need to identify it. See, in one zone you can have 20 location, right?
Hmm.
Out of this 20 location, how you are going to differentiate which location is your transshipment point? Because sometimes what happens, sometimes, like when you are doing a planning, maybe the, based on the Incoterm or based on the agreement, the particular, your shipper, your customer says, okay, I'm responsible to pay the carrier for the transshipment point 1 and 2. How you are going to differentiate it then? So in order to differentiate that particular attribute, we need to maintain within your zone, which are the locations that is your transshipment point. So this is just for an assignment.
Okay, not all the locations will be transshipment point. That's what you're saying.
No.
Yeah.
So as I told you, these are the only locations where your particular loading and unloading happens and mode of transport always changes. Because if your
Yeah.
mode of transport is not changing, then it is not a transshipment point.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to delete the assignments, you can also delete it. Similarly, if you go into the next location, you can just type in as US. Okay. And here, instead of Port of Bremen, you can say Port of New York as well. Okay. So in the Port of New York, okay, it's updated. So this is the second important feature I would like to say of your particular transshipment points, where you can actually specify which are the transshipment points for that particular location. Okay. Any questions from anyone? Clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we come to the another important master data, which is your mode of transport. So why mode of transport is important, I tell you. Can you tell me why mode of transport is important? Why we require that? What you will achieve by using mode of transport? Any idea? No idea.
We can
Yeah,
estimate the
basically it
time.
will define how the calculation of charges and lot of other factors will depend, like if it is air or sea or by land. Probably one of the factors.
Not exactly. See, so I'm just removing this. Okay. I hope you can take it from the recording. Okay. See, basically what happens when you are basically doing a transport. Just give me a minute, just a minute. Yeah, sorry. So if you see this flow, so when you will be setting up a transportation network, as I told you, you need to have a truck. right? So what happens here? So just try to understand this, then your entire clarification will be there on the resource part. So the mode means all are connected to your resources. So what happens here? So suppose I have a truck which is moving from Poland to Germany. So what happens? The highest level is truck. So truck is the resource for me. Now truck can be of two types, right? One can be a cool truck and another can be a non-cool truck. Okay. Now if I'm using a cool truck, it can be basically it can have different variation, right? It can be a 50 tons truck. It can be a 100-ton truck. Similarly, when you're talking about a non-cool truck, it can be, suppose I'm using only one variation, 75-ton truck. So in SAP terminology, this is mandatory. We need a truck. But whether you need to break it down into this variation, that is not a mandatory thing. So if you are having such type of hierarchy, so this cool truck, non-cool truck, these are called as a means of transport. And whenever we are basically creating any means of transport, always remember every means of transport is linked to a mode of transport. So my mode of transport is road, but my means of transport can be a cool truck and non-cool truck. Or it can be a short bed trailer and a big bed trailer. Okay. And when you come across to this capacity part, although when you are creating a truck, you can always maintain the capacity here. But in case you want to have different variations in terms of capacities, in terms of length, width, height of the resource and all, then you can also create another master data which is called as an equipment. Okay. So the basic relationship here is every means of transport is linked to your mode of transport, and every mode of transport and every resource which you are creating is linked to your means of transport. And in case you are maintaining equipment type, that is also linked here. Okay. So this is the relationship we need to set up before you are actually fully covered on the resourcing part. Is the relationship clear to you, all of you?
Yes.
Okay. So before you create the resource, then first of all, we need to make sure that the mode of transport and the means of transport is there. Always make sure that try to use as much standard as possible. Okay, you can always create the Z1, but obviously if you're having a bifurcation such as cool truck, non-cool truck, this is not going to have a standard. You can copy and use the Z1, but the mode of transport and all, which is always standard. So where we define mode of transport, if we again go into the configuration, I go to SPRO. I go to transportation management. Under transport management, I go to master data. Under master data, I go to resources. And under resources, so basically before going to resource, go to transport lane, and here you need to define the transportation mode. So it is under a transportation lane. So under lane, you have mode of transport. And if you see, the standard mode of transport is sufficient. So one mode of transport is road, another is rail, another is sea, another is inland waterway, which is also called as a barge. Another is air, another is parcel and highway. So if you go to road, every mode of transport has a description, and how will you know whether this 01 is road? For that, we have to use a category. So this category actually is into 4. This category will actually specify whether this 01 is road or not. And main carriage is actually used only for air or sea. for road and truck and motorcycle and all, you don't have to use any main carriage. Main carriage means the maximum distance for which the mode of transport is being used. Generally we use for ocean or air. And here also, if you see the relationship, what I told just the reverse, right? That every means of transport is linked to a mode of transport. That's what I told you, right? But here, every mode of transport can also be linked to a means of transport. But I don't want to assign any other means of transport here, because if you are assigning the means of transport here, that means only you are assigning. That means you are saying that only there can be one means of transport per mode of transport, which is not correct, right? You can have two means of transport also using the same mode of transport. That is, the reverse is true. So I will always recommend don't put anything here, keep it as blank. And this sustainability factor means this is the factor which is taken into account for basically determining how much of CO2 emissions is occurring in the industry. As you know that whenever any type of vehicle is running on the road or any type of ship is running on the sea, there are fuel emissions, right? And the main objective of transportation industry is to reduce the fuel emission. So in order to reduce the fuel emission, how much fuel is being basically being emitted by that particular mode of transport, for that we need a integration with an analytics. The analytics cloud solution is being developed to measure this sustainability. So for that, this sustainability factor can be deployed. As of now, it is more of a development phase. It is still going on. How SAP will actually use this to provide the CO2 emission less atmosphere. So this is something we can take up later on. Okay. So just as you have created mode of transport, you can also create another mode of transport for rail also, where the mode of category is rail. If you want to create a mode of category for sea, we can create sea. If you want to see here for sea, the main carriage is tick mark, because that is the maximum distance which will be covered. And here then you have air. So for air, you can see mode of transport is here. Again, the main carriage is tick mark. And in case you want to use parcel also uses mode of transport road. Okay. Any question on the mode of transport? Clear to everyone? Yes. Okay. Next will come into the, so I will not create any new value, because the standard what SAP provides is sufficient, because you can always create a Z1, but ultimately the category mode of transport will always be road, rail, sea, air. So it doesn't make too much of value addition to basically create a new one. Okay. Now, once we have done this, the next part what you have to consider is the means of transport. So if you go here, every mode of transport is linked to a means of transport. So means of transport means what? Means of transport is you go to resource, under resources, you get your means of transport. So here we can think of creating two means of transport, right? So let me first of all explain what is mean by a means of transport. So means of transport, obviously we have the standard ones. So if you see the standard ones, the first 5 are standard ones. If it is using road, so if I scroll to the left hand side a little bit, in case you are using means of transport road, so the standard code is 31. If you are using rail, the standard code is 72. If you are using plane, the standard code is 006. If you are using ship, it is 011. If it is car, it is 038. So these are the different types of codes or the mode of transport which SAP is providing. Okay, and this code and this mode of transport gives a differentiating factor to the means of transport. Because you know that when I'm using a short pull truck or a non-pull truck, a short reefer, every resource has to be linked to a mode of transport, right? So this is where the relationship is. Now you go back to the notepad, what I told you. Every means of transport is linked to a mode of transport. So every means of transport is linked to a mode of transport. Okay. And here is the resource class. So resource class means here you can specify whether this means of transport is for rail car, ship, trailer, truck. So this resource class is actually used to identify the resource. So again, I will recommend to keep this as blank, because when you'll be creating a resource separately, you can mention the resource class there. Because if you are using a resource class, for example, truck, and later on the same means of transport is used for trailer, then that becomes a problem. So you can have multiple variants to this means of transport, so that accordingly it is better to keep it blank. This is the speeds. So speed distance. So that means basically what is this? What is the significance of this? The significance is that every type of basically so the speed and the low speed, medium speed, high speed. So they represent the speeds when they are traveling in different developed areas on highways and motorways. So if you are in a motorway, it's obviously a high speed. If you are going on a developed area, it's if you're going on a motorway, yeah, it's a high speed. If you're going on a developed area, it can be an average speed. And if you're going on a high terrain or highways or any other, it will be a low speed. So the speeds are basically used to determine the distance and the duration. That is the main objective, because based on the speed, you know how much time I'm going to take to move from point A to point B. And the next part is the distance factor. Okay. So what is the distance factor? So the distance factor is the ratio. So if you see here, it is the ratio between the distances to be considered and the straight line distance. So these distance factor are actually used in case you are using GIS and all. So there is a factor which can be deployed in order to use the distance between the straight line and the normal distances between point A and point B. Okay. Any question? Is it clear to everyone what I'm explaining?
Yeah, Brenda. Can you please once again explain the distance factor?
So distance factor is basically the distance ratio between the distance to be considered and the straight line distance. So there is the ratio is calculated in that way. Then this distance factor is actually used to calculate the distance and duration in case the speeds are not available. So I'll come down when I come into the GIS, I'll tell you where these features are used. Okay. Then comes the multi-resource. See, this concept is very important. What is multi-resource? See, suppose I have a shipment document. Okay, so suppose that every shipment document, or in SAP TM terminology, we call it as a freight order, right? So every freight order will have a arrival date, which is your loading date, because this is the time where the goods are loaded, and departure. Sorry. This is the departure time. So suppose your truck is coming to a premise, it is departing at 4 p.m. and the arrival time is 5 p.m. right? So arrival means where it is unloading, correct? Is this terminology clear? What is departure? What is arrival? Please tell me if you're not understanding, because I'm going very slowly now. When I will start with the order management and planning, I will pick up my speed. So that's why I'm taking time and trying to understand. Okay. Do all of you understand the concept of departure and arrival?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why did I write loading and unloading there?
Because you have to load the order for the departure and unload on arrival. So,
Yes. Yes. You are right. Because whenever we are doing any shipment or when you are creating any freight order, what we are doing, we are actually loading the freight into the truck, right? That is a freight order. That is a shipment. Okay, so one truck is equal to one freight order, is equal to one shipment. So whenever you are going to load, you will have a specific departure time, because the truck will depart only after loading, and when it will come to customer location, it will unload. That is arrival time. So suppose I have a departure and arrival time at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. This is the time frame. Okay. Now during this time, if I am marking the resource as multi-resource, okay, so that means I can, okay, if I'm not marking it as a multi-resource, that means I cannot use that resource multiple times for other freight orders. Okay, so for that reason, always put a tick mark on multi-resource. So multi-resource means whether the resource which is assigned to the means of transport represents a single resource or whether it represents a multi-resource. So what happens here, in case you are not marking as multi-resource, and if if you are planning another freight order with the same means of transport, okay, in that case it will not allow you to use the same resource within this time frame. So that's why it is very important that you should mark them as multi-resource so that you can deploy the resource multiple times for a multi-resource. And one more thing is that in case of a multi-resource, so as I told you, single resource means which is not multi-resource. Single resource means it can be deployed only once. So single resources are generally used to plan a company's own fleet of trucks. Multi-resources are used to represent your subcontracting trucks. Okay. And if you are using, the process of, sorry, and in case you are using the process of your particular multi-resource, okay, if I mark here as multi-resource, system will actually ask you how many times you have to use the resource. Either you mark them as unlimited times, then in that case you don't need to enter any value, or if you remove this value, you have to enter the maximum number of times these resources can be deployed. So here you have to use that. Okay. Clear? And lock multi-resource. So lock multi-resource means what? So lock multi-resource means this will define whether multi-resources gets locked during planning. That means if a multi-resource is locked, it cannot be used in two parallel planning sessions. If it is not locked, then the system will enable two or more parallel planning sessions. That is the main difference between lock and unlock. Okay, yeah. Any question on this?
No.
Okay. Then we come down and there we see additional properties. So what is additional properties? So additional properties, first of all, is a passive. Has anyone heard about the word passive resource, active resource? Anyone? Anyone knows about this terminology? Because there are two types of resources always. One is your active resource, another is your passive resource. Can you tell me, or what do you feel? What is the main difference between them? So active resource, passive resource means if you are not putting a tick mark for passive, it's an active resource. Okay, so active resource means they are the resources which can move alone. But if you are putting a tick mark for passive, that means they can be moved only by an active resource. So if I'm considering any road mode of transport, trucks are active resource, trailers are passive resource. Similarly, if we are talking about rail mode of transport, locomotive is an active resource, rail car is a passive resource. So that is the meaning between active and passive. So in case we are having active resources, they don't need any support. If we are using a passive resource, they need to be coupled to an active resource. Okay. Then you have a question called as a no capacity. So no capacity means, so if you go into the help button, you can easily understand what is the meaning of that. So no capacity means basically the system wants to check the checkbox if you are assigning. So that means it, okay, if you see here, you use this checkbox to specify that the resource is not to have its own capacity. Therefore, select this checkbox for the means of transport to which the vehicle resource is assigned. That means if we want to have, suppose, a tractor and a trailer, then because the tractor, is pulling the trailer and all the load of the freight goes into the trailer, so the tractor will not have any capacity, right? So in that case, you can mark them as no capacity. But this does not make too much of value addition. This is just for, just for the indicator that whether you are planning to assign any load or not. That is the main thing. Okay. Similarly, you have this one called as a no direct load. So no direct load means whether, so this parameter defines that goods cannot be loaded into the resource. Okay, so in case a resource has any trailer or something, you are not allowed to load any type of goods into that particular means of transport. If you have such type of requirement, then you have to click on no direct load. And this is the meaning of this sustainability factor we have already discussed in the means of transport. And then you have got another called as a own MTR. Own MTR means whether the resources which are assigned to this means of transport belongs to your own fleet or not. Okay. So if it does not belong to your own fleet, then you should not put a tick mark on own MTR. Then comes the schedule MTR. So schedule MTR means this parameter. Yeah.
So, I have a question. So if I mark it as my own MTR, so what is the difference it plays during the planning?
Your own MTR means basically in that case, you don't need to subcontract that particular freight order to the carrier because it is your own fleet, right? So in that case, when my planner plans with this, he knows that a carrier cannot charge you for using any vehicle type.
Okay.
Okay. So whether you want to plan using your own fleet or not, that is what this identifier will indicate to you. If you are planning with your own fleet, then you should not subcontract it to any carrier, right? Your own driver should be able to run the particular shipment using this particular means of transport. Then comes the schedule MTR. Schedule MTR means whether you want to use the means of transport for schedule. Schedule, I think all of you, I don't know whether any of you have known this word schedule. Schedule means you can create, you have a fixed departure time, you have a fixed arrival time. So for example, if I talk about, for example, a particular a flight is always leaving from Bangalore at 9 a.m. and it is arriving at Hyderabad at 11 a.m. That means always a flight has a fixed schedule, a fixed departure and a fixed arrival time. Okay, so in case a specific means of transport has a specific schedules, in that case you can use this schedule MTR. Okay. Then you have your GIS quality. So GIS quality means what? GIS quality option will determine whether your GIS is being used or not. So if this option is selected, then the GIS will calculate the distance and duration. So how it will calculate? So the duration determination will take into account the low, medium and high speed. So in other words, if you are using GIS, you have to mention the speeds here. If you are not using GIS, then no, put a tick here, and in that case you need to maintain the distance factor. So if a GIS tool is not used, the distance will be calculated as a product of a straight line distance and the distance factor, while the duration will be based on the average speed entered. Okay, clear? And in case there is another tick mark called as a default MTR. So default MTR means if no specific means of transport could be determined for a specific freight order, in that case, this default means of transport can be deployed. Okay. So I will create a single means of transport for you because I need two means of transport. One for road, one for ship, for example. Okay. So I will create this. So one I will use for a non-full truck maybe. Underscore for full truck load. I mean, you can maintain a low speed, medium speed, high speed. Okay, I use a multi-resource, unlimited number of times. Okay, and suppose it's not my own MTR, I'm borrowing external, and I just click on save. And here is a truck for full truck load with non-full capacity. Similarly, I will use one for C as well. Okay. So this is truck and this is ship. And here instead of this one, I will use C. And I think this is 72. I just need to check that. Okay. And if you're not knowing the speed for this, no problem. You can keep it blank. Okay. Okay. Any question? Only for C, I just need to name this code. So the code for ship is 011. So what we have done so far? So far we have created the means of transport. We have created the mode of transport. And now you can create a resource. Before creating resource, you can also create an option of equipment type and equipment group, so that you can actually be very specific about the capacity of the trucks you are going to use. Again, I tell you equipment type, equipment group is not mandatory. You can skip without it. Okay. So in order to create your equipment type and equipment group, go back. And here within your resource, you have this. Okay. So you can use this group. So if you see here, basically there are three types of groups. One is a vehicle group, one is a handling group, one is a transportation unit group. So for trucks, we need to basically click on this vehicle group. So suppose I have a truck, which is my vehicle truck. And if I go on this vehicle group, my group is suppose a vehicle truck. And here you need to specify the class of resource, whether this equipment type which you are creating is for truck or trailer or ship or rail car. So I select truck. And then under the type, I can specify whether it's a 1-ton truck, 10-ton truck, 15-ton truck, or 20-ton truck. Okay. And here you need to mention the description of the 20-ton truck. You can specify which means of transport you are going to use. In case this truck has a compartment, then you have to create a compartment profile. It is not mandatory. In case this truck is carrying or assigning any packaging material, you can use the packaging material. Sometimes what happens, the truck is carrying a material which has a packaging material type. So you can specify the packaging material type here. And when you are creating a packaging material type here, you can also specify whether this particular truck is carrying any food grade resource or not. In case it is carrying a food grade resource, then you can put a tick mark here. And this is the capacity of the particular, the capacity of the particular truck which you are basically creating. So you can specify what is the capacity, what is the length of the truck, width of the truck, height of the truck, what are the number of units that can be accommodated in that truck. And below you have the properties. So you can specify what is the gross weight, what is the volume, what is the tear weight, what is the maximum length, what is the maximum width, maximum height. Yeah, what is the split deck position? Split deck position means if your truck has got number of decks, you can have some spacing between each of the deck. So that is what is called as a split deck. You can also specify what is the connector distance, and all this information you can put it here. In case this truck is based on certain temperature, so you can do a temperature control. And here you can specify what is the minimum temperature, what is the maximum temperature. Further, when you are using a truck, you can have some axle. So what is the axle group? What is the axle type? What is the connecting distance between the axles? All this information you can actually use here. Okay. So this is the first axle, second axle, all the information you can put it here. So this information will actually either come from the carrier or it will come for the, basically from the, your client should give you this information. This is nothing that you can configure without having any knowledge. Okay. Any question on this? Is it understood to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, I'll just take 2 minutes break and then I'll create a data for the vehicle type, vehicle group. Today we'll try to complete this. Okay. Just give me 2-3 minutes or 4-5 minutes break. Okay. Okay, everyone can hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So I will create a new vehicle group. So, so this is, for example, ZV1. I'll create a vehicle group for non-chill product. Maybe and this is the resource class. And with this, I will not be using all the trucks. Maybe I'll just use the 15-ton trucks or 10-ton truck maybe. So my means of transport I need to assign here. So my means of transport was the one which I created, which is your Z01 underscore FTL. And here you can basically maintain the payload weight. You can maintain the capacity. So it is 10 PO. Okay. If you want to maintain some length width height, you can do it. So the maximum gross weight. Okay. And the tier weight. So you can also specify the tier volume. You can also specify the length, width, height. So in all this information, actually, you need to collect the information. Because it's a non-chill truck, so if you don't want to control through temperature, you can keep it blank. But if you want to control any temperature here, in that case, you can specify, okay, my minimum temperature is 15 and the maximum temperature is 25 or 27. And you can give the temperature here. Okay. If you want any active ventilation, you can say, okay, I want a ventilation for this truck. And okay, peak capacity. And here you can maintain the different types of exit distance and all. Again, this is mainly required in case you are doing an external planning and your carrier, or rather if you want to do it from your internal fleet also, you can have this information. Okay. And then you can create the table. Okay, clear? Similarly, if you want to do it for your C, you can also do that. So if you see, I've selected truck here. So if you want to have a specific vehicle group for ship also, you can, you can create it as ZV1, just copy that to ZV2. And here instead of truck, you can say it's a non-chill product transport buyers vessel. And here the resource class should be vessel. Okay. And then I have to go to vehicle type. And here instead of FTL, it should be FCL. Okay. It is ZV1 and this is ZV2. This is the equipment type and equipment group. So there are some other configurations here which you see. In case you are planning to transport a container, then also you can specify here the transportation groups. So for example, the group is for container is always marked as CN. For CN, you can specify what are the different components of container. So suppose if you want to transport any product using a 20 feet container, so you have to click on 20 feet and here you can specify what is the tier weight, what is the volume, what is the capacity, what is the payload weight, what is the cubic capacity, maximum length, height, weight. You can maintain all this information. And in case this container is to be transported by any specific mode of transport, you can say road, rail, and sea. Okay. Similarly, if you are going, if you want to use any handling resource means, for example, if you are transporting using, like, for example, like forklift. Okay. So like, or it will be picked up by a crane and then the movement will be done by a forklift. So in that case, the resource group and the resource class should be forklift. And here you can specify the capacity of the forklift. Okay. Any other question from anyone? Is the resource type, equipment group, mode of transport, means of transport all clear to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So just a question to you. So as of now, I think you are around 15 or 16, right? How many consultants or rather how many of you are there in the training?
I think it's a batch of 20, I think.
20. So maybe what I will recommend, see, it's up to you for your learning. You can group into 4 or 5 in one batch. Okay. And just try to create, because you have access to both ECC system, right? Just try to create an enterprise structure and just try to see if you can just create, the locations and all. Okay. And let me know if you're facing any issues, because ultimately, we are going to use the different data which we have created in our, transaction data, right, later on. So I will recommend if you can just start creating those. As of now, we have considered, locations, transportation zone, mode of transport, means of transport, and this. But please don't change any master data which has been created, both in configuration as well as end user. Whatever you want to create, you can create of your own and then just keep it as reference and use it whenever the time will come. So you can just discuss internally among yourself how you will want to group the batches and all, so that you can just create it, and wherever you face any issue, just let me know. Okay. Okay. So the last part what we'll cover today is resource, because ultimately whatever we are doing, if you see here, it is because of this resource, right? Because resource is a very critical part of your transportation process. So without resource, basically the physical movement, you cannot happen. Now there are, in order to create a resource, again, resource is a completely a TM object. You don't have to do anything in ECC for that. So in order to create a resource, what you have to do? So I will open the configuration node, because there are a lot of configuration which is there, which is not mandatory for all, but you can just release it. You can just relate it. And this is the end users one. So if you go into master data, under master data, you go resource, and under resource, if you see, you can get an overview resource. So if you want to have an overview of all the resources which is being used here, this is called as an overview resource. Okay, this is also called as the object work list. So either you can use this, or you can also directly go into the transportation cockpit and you can create your resource. So if you are opening this overview resource, you can basically see what are the resources which has been created here. Okay. So there are different resources created and you can basically go through it. So this is also called as a work list. So work list is a type of report. So we don't have any report specific things in TM. The reportings are called as a work list. So I'll come to this work list concept later on. So before you do it, this is the option where you have to define your resource. So I'll go again, what I used to do that first on the end user, then I will correlate with the configuration. Okay. So can you tell me how many resources you need for our scenario?
3.
Yes. Right. 3. Why 3 resource? Anyone, any idea why 3 resource? Hello.
One for the road transport to, and then one for the ocean and one for the inland again. But I believe the 2 inland modes, they both are same truck type, same MTR type. We need 2 resources. I mean, maybe.
Yes, you're right. So it's either 2 or 3 depending, considering that you can use the same resource for the stage 1 and the stage 3. In that case, you can use it. Okay. But if you feel that you need to have different truck, because see the reason why you can create, that anybody can challenge, but because it's more of a, a type of a, demo session we are doing here, you can say. But because every truck has a unique truck registration number, right, for different country. So you may tell me, okay, even if you're using the same resource, okay, we can always use a different 2 trucks, or because if it is a end-to-end transport which is crossing 2 borders, then we can always use the same truck as well. So it differs how the processes you are going to see, that is control industry. Okay. So before you actually create a resource, you again need to have the information from your business about the nomenclature. Okay, because this is an important thing, because unless the nomenclature is known to you, you will not be able to basically, you can create a resource, but maybe the business will not be able to identify it properly. So this is a type of a data collection activity. You need to send an Excel to the business, and based on that, the business needs to tell you how the basic thing is going to be set up in the system. Okay.
Okay. And one more question. I mean, the scenario that we're doing, that has 3 stages. But what about the originating document, the sales order? I mean, would it have?
I'll show you how it gets splitted. Original
Okay.
sales order is from shipping point to ship to party.
Yes.
Okay. But when you will be doing it, it will be, there are some setup based on which you should be able to split it. Okay. That I will show you later on how this is done. Okay. So before you create a resource, okay. So first of all, let me show you what are the fields. So this is the resource ID. In case you want to say that I want to use a resource for a particular location and owned by a particular organizational ID. Organizational ID means basically it's based on that means a particular organization is owning this. In that case, you can use our organizational unit ID there. Okay. So again, it is not mandatory to be used, but in case you want to use it, you can always use that. Okay. Can you tell me under which circumstances an organizational unit ID can be used? What do you think? What will be the use case for that?
When it's being managed by practical planning and execution, or maybe that's it.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So I like. So do you know like any use case which comes to your mind why this organizational unit is being used? See, a particular, if a resource is owned by your own shipper, then obviously for that shipper, there has to be an organizational unit assigned to it, right? So because it's your own fleet, right? So you can always indicate in the resource that because it's my own fleet, I'm going to deploy that resource from my own shipment only. So if you have such type of things to be kept in mind, then you can always assign an organizational unit ID because you are the owner of that resource. But suppose if you are not owning that resource and you are getting it subcontracted from other plants or from other entities, then in that case, you can keep this organizational unit blank. So these two things are generally kept blank because if you are using an organizational unit and location, then the resource is restricted to be used only for that particular location for that organizational ID only. Okay. Then comes the resource type. So resource type means whether it's a vehicle resource. So vehicle resource, 99% of the resources are vehicle resource because this is the resource which is can be deployed for truck, trailer, rail car, vehicle, anything. You have got other types of resource like handling resource. Handling resource means if you are using a forklift, it's a handling resource. If you are using a container to move the transport, then it's a container, it's called as a transportation unit resource. Okay. So in major cases, we use vehicle resource as the resource type. And you will have resource class also. So resource class means whether the resource is a truck, trailer, rail car, ship, box, door, forklift, even driver is also resource. So this will help you to identify what is the class of the resource you are going to use. So this resource class actually is configurable. So if I go here, so you can create your own resource class. So let me show you where is the resource class here. Resource class, where did it go? Okay. Yes. So this is the resource class. Generally, recommendation is to use the standard resource class. So if you see, if I'm using a truck, the resource is vehicle. If I'm using a trailer, it's a vehicle. Rail car is a vehicle. Ship is a vehicle. So what type of resource is this? That is identified by the resource class. If we're using a ULD, it's a TU. If it's a container, it's a TU. If it's a driver, it's a driver. Forklift, doors, all these are handling resource. Okay. So if you want to configure any new resource class, you can go here. But generally, I have not seen anyone configuring resource class because ultimately, whatever resource class you're going to use, this is going to follow under this criteria only. Okay. So let me then create one resource or use an existing resource, for example. Now, once you enter a resource, you see based on the resource class, you see you're entering vehicle because you have entered resource type as a vehicle. So that's why you don't need to enter calendar, transportation unit and handling. If you have selected there as calendar resource, then you would have gone here. But because you have selected vehicle, so it is under vehicle. And this is the place where you can specify the further segregation. So if you go into this particular master data, if you see here, what I told you under a resource, you have this means of transport linkage. So you can basically link your resource to your means of transport here. And here you can specify what is the equipment type and group. So that means the vehicle type and vehicle group can be assigned here. So within a resource, the linkages are there.
So we know, is it mandatory to have vehicle type and vehicle group and vehicle type configuration?
No.
So what purpose does it serve and what is the extra feature, or it's only required for the LSP scenario?
Yeah. So basically, the purpose is suppose if you want to make that's what I told you. Like if you want to have a segregation within a resource, that this resource is only to be used for those planning where it requires 10-ton capacity or 20-ton capacity, 30-ton capacity. So that means you are making a one layer below your main resource. Okay, so that means you are adding more specific criteria because you saw that in equipment type and equipment group, there was so many data related to that resource, right? Which we actually don't have in the resource master. So if you want to assign so much of attributes which you are maintaining in the equipment type and equipment group for a resource, then you need to maintain it or else you must skip that. It is not mandatory.
Okay, but I mean, I think there's a contradiction here. Then I can define the capacity in the resource also, right? I mean, if you go to the capacity tab.
Only capacity is there. But if you want, but as I told you, you don't have so much of other information which you saw there, right? You don't have the king feed load. You don't have the
Okay.
speed brake position load. You don't have the information related to the axle load. You don't have that. All this information comes from the equipment type and equipment group. Only the capacity is there, but if you see it is only the capacity here. Here you don't know whether it's your tire weight capacity. You don't know whether it's a gross weight capacity or not. It's just a generic capacity of the resource. If you want to have a detailed capacity version available for a particular equipment or group, then only you need this, or else you can skip this.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And means of transport, I told you, you need to assign a means of transport to a location. You need to have a time zone. You need to have a factory calendar. So factory calendar is required by because the operating time of your particular resource is governed by a factory calendar. So if you are saying factory calendar W8 means 5 working days, 2 non-working days. In that case, any type of planning which happens in Saturday, Sunday cannot consider this resource because you are using a factory calendar or W8, which indicates that Saturday, Sunday is a holiday for this resource. And this is the capacity. This is a unit of measurement. All this information you can keep it here. And then if you go into the general data tab, based on the means of transport, all this configuration will be updated. You don't need to do anything. This is the transportation tab. So transportation tab means the information, transportation relevant information for the resource is captured in the transportation tab. So what is the transportation relevant information? So this is from the validity period. So validity period means basically from date to date. So from date to date means basically for which dates the resource is valid. Because sometimes what happens if you are using an aging resource, that resource will not be used throughout the end of the life, right? It can be used for 1 year or 2 years. So you can always validate, specify the validity. So based on the validity, the planning should be done. And this is the resource class. So again, the resource class will come from the header level. In case you have maintained any organizational unit role ID, you have seen in the first screen that if you have not defined any organizational unit, then obviously this fields will be blank. If you have maintained vehicle type, vehicle group, it will come here. So in case a vehicle requires any specific service, you can specify the service date. You can specify who is the owner of that resource. You can specify whether this resource is owned resource, whether it's an externally owned resource or whether it's a leased resource. So if you are using a leased resource, then you can specify the lease contract. This is the registration number of the truck. And also whether the truck has been registered in which country, you can specify that. In case this truck is given by a specific driver, then you can specify the driver ID. You can specify the planning block. So that means in case a resource is defective, you can do a block, a planning block. That means you are not allowed to plan with this resource till the planning block is removed. So if you want to create a planning block, you can go into the configuration here. And here you see there is a block, configuration called as a yes, this one, planning block. So you can create your own planning block if you want to have a block. Then you use that resource up to because resource is aging. Just an example. Okay. So in this way, you can specify the reason code. So once this particular reason code, so please, unless you know it, don't do any planning block or else system will not allow you to plan. You can also give a special instruction to the resource. So you can say that the resource is that the resource should be handled with care. If you want to create your own special instruction for your resource, then you can again do a mapping in the configuration where this is the special instruction. So you can give S1 and you can give S2, and my S2 is handle resource is only for expertise. That means only an expert driver can drive this. Just an instruction. Okay. Again, these are not at all mandatory. You can understand these are specific information available for the resource. Then you can also specify a resource condition. So if you want to have a specific configuration, you can always go with resource condition. So resource is good or resource is in resource is active. Okay. Here you can specify. Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay. Clear?
Yes.
So once you are defining the resource condition, then this is the, if you scroll down, you can specify whether this resource needs to have any compartment profile. So there is a functionality or rather a module called as a event management module. So in this event management module, you can actually specify whether the resource tracking and tracing can be done. So that is this is a tracking and a tracing module, which is event management system. And it can track and trace where is the resource, what is the resource available, whether the loading done, unloading done. So all the generic information about resource and its attributes can be basically done for by event management. And if you want to use event management for resource tracking and tracing, then this tick mark should be there. So event management is a separate module. Okay. If the resource is actually carrying a food grade resource, then this tick mark should be there. And if the resource is owned by a shipper, then the shipper owned resource is there. And in case you want to integrate your resource with your EWM system, because ultimately this truck will actually go into the warehouse where the loading, picking, packing, good issue will be done, right? So for your loading and unloading instructions or the products to be sent for put away and for pickup to warehouse, you need to basically have this packaging material specified. Only if you are using TM to EWM integration. If you are not using TM to EWM integration, not required. Okay.
But Vinod, what is the benefit of having packaging material here on the resource? I'm just trying to understand the scenario.
So basically, when your shipment document is transferred to your to your EWM system, it creates a transportation unit. And transportation unit is nothing but a truck with a packaging material into it. So the concept of packaging material with a means of transport actually creates a TU. So it is more from the perspective of creating an object in EWM, where you have a package material, the package material is loaded onto a truck, and that entire combination is called as a transportation unit. So for that, you need to have the packaging material assigned. So if for a particular resource, you are not planning to use that particular truck for your EWM, then don't maintain any means of transport. It's a packaging material there.
Okay, good.
And this is the capacity. So capacity information means obviously you can understand whatever capacity you are given in the above. This is the capacity of the truck. You can add also the capacity based on volume, length and all. So if you are maintaining the vehicle type and vehicle group, some of the physical properties will come here. You don't need to basically type in again. But not all information is there. Maximum information is available here, whatever you maintain. So your question, what I was telling you, that if you are using a vehicle type and a vehicle group, all the generic information about the physical properties will come here. Okay.
Okay.
This is the downtime. So downtime means what? Downtime means when a resource is not available for planning. So you say that for entire 1 year, between 12 to 13, suppose my truck driver goes for lunch. So in that case, my truck will not be available for planning. So you can say it's a planned downtime. Or maybe the resource is, or maybe the truck requires lubrication every day for 1 hour between this time. So you can say resource is inactive. So this is the break time of the particular resource where the resources are not available to be deployed. Okay. This is the qualification tab. So qualification tab means basically here you can specify the qualification values. The qualification type means, for example, what type of qualification is required by the driver to drive this resource. So this is again not a very, it's not mandatory to use this. You can skip this. But if you want to create a specific qualification type and qualification value, what you have to do, you have to go for the configuration. So here if you see settings for qualification, alternative names, compartment, registration, resource category, in here, you have to go here. So I just create another qualification type, say qualification based on not license, but qualification based on distances, for example. Okay. And here you can maintain some values. Then in case my resource qualification, if it has driven only greater than 10,000 kilometers, then I consider it as a qualification or to be used for a particular transportation planning. So this is the type of a wish list. Okay, you can say in that way. Okay. So you can say that this is a qualification. Again, if you don't use it, no problem. Okay. So the qualification is done here. Then if you go on to the next one, you can also attach an equipment. So attach an equipment means basically what type of equipment is attached with this resource. So if you want to attach any container, you can assign a 20-feet container, etc. So for that you can assign, you have to create a configuration for equipment category. So the equipment category is this. So this is your C1, for example, and I want to assign a particular container for FTL. Okay. So once you're doing this, the next part is here. You can also attach any alternative names. Okay. So you can specify an alternative name for this resource. So I can, if you want to configure an alternative names for your resource, you can always go into this category. So you can say alternative name is, for example, CV. Okay. For a CAB truck for 15.
So we know one question here.
Yeah.
You just assigned a task. I mean, if you go to the resource, you mentioned we can attach an equipment also, but is it necessary or does
No.
MTR
Not
suffice?
necessary. Not necessary. See, that's why you see here, these are all free text. Okay. There's nothing dropped out. So it is just a way that we are giving an identification that, okay, this, if in case this resource is assigned to any equipments, you can assign the equipment types and the category. Okay.
Okay, but my equipment type that you have attached, which is C1, the transportation mode is container. So, and this one is truck. So wouldn't be causing any issues?
No, suppose if you are transporting any specific container on the truck for an intermediate point. Okay. So maybe for a specific location, you are just loading the container and you want to plan the movement of the container on the truck. So in that case, you can say, okay, this container is loaded onto a truck and accordingly, I will do the planning based on the truck, but also keeping in mind that my container is loaded into it. Okay. So if you want to have a planning based on that, then you can always specify this. But if you see, this is the alternative name. It's not, sorry, you don't know this. Yeah. Here, if you see, that's why the attached equipment is not a drop down level. It's a free text. You can specify, you may not specify.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay. So if you want to use any grouping attribute, you can group a particular resource. I think this part you can escape. It's not mandatory thing and all. Okay, I've never seen anyone doing this grouping of resource and all. Okay, so if you want to create a new resource, you can go here and you can click, for example, I have to create one truck for FTL truck. Okay, I will use the resource type. I will use the resource class. I will use the create button. I will use the vehicle type. I can use the vehicle type here. I can use the means of transport. What was the means of transport? Z01 underscore FTL. This is the time zone. You can specify the dimension. You can specify the factory calendar. You can specify the capacity. It's a small truck. Okay. You can leave a description here. That is full truck load. And here you can give some transportation information, like for example, what is the validity period of the truck from today till 1 year. You can also specify who owns this truck. And you can specify the registration number of the truck, the registration country of the truck. You can give, if you want to have any instruction, you can give it. You can give a condition. Okay, I don't want to use this. So it's a shipper owned, it's not a shipper owned truck, so I just keep it blank. You can see the capacity, you can get the properties. In case you want to give the break time, you can have the break time put it here. So suppose the break time is between 12 to 1 p.m. Okay. This is the type of downtime. Okay. If you want to give some qualification value, you are welcome. You can give a qualification type. You can give a qualification value. You can give an attached equipment. Like C1. And you can give it a 22 BO. If you want to give some alternative names, you can give it. So this is what your resource ID is. Okay. Any question? Clear to everyone how to create a resource? Okay, so similarly, we have to create for the ship. In order to create it for the ship, so I'll just replace this FTL with FCL underscore ship, and this is the location. Only change you have to do is the resource class. So instead of a truck, it will be a ship. And here it will be FCL. Okay, and this is the means of transport was I think Z02 or something. What was that? Yeah, it was Z01 underscore FCL. This is the time zone. In case that this resource is not owned by you, you can always change the ownership to your own resource. So it is if it is owned by you. Okay. And you can give the registration number. Okay, you can give an instruction if required. And everything this is okay. Okay. Any question from anyone? Clear to everyone? So this part, so the resource part is done. Okay. So we'll stop here today. Any question, let me know.
No, Vinod, not for my side.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So we'll meet tomorrow.